What he didn't tell us in the book is that when he restored the missing amino acids in the plant protein, they behaved exactly like casein, and the rats started getting cancer again, which means that it's not something specific about animal protein that was promoting cancer growth. It was just having complete amino acids, because that is what actually promotes cell growth in general, including that of tumors. So this was a nice little thing to leave out from the book, because anyone who is even a vegan is going to be getting complete protein if they're eating multiple kinds of foods each day. You can't get around it. So his experiments don't necessarily have much relevance to real life, especially if you're not a rat eating a refined diet from birth until death. So now this was really interesting. And it's actually something that I didn't put in my original critique. So if you didn't read my forks over knives critique, actually, did anyone in here read my forks over knives critique? Oh, wow, cool. This is something I found later, and I really wish that I had found it earlier and I could have put it in my first one because it was fascinating. But so in India, along with these researchers doing experiments on rats, there are researchers doing the same kind of experiment, almost identical, with monkeys. And so this was in the 1980s, and they were doing the same study. They were they're exposing the monkeys to aflatoxin, feeding them different levels of protein, and seeing what happened. Except the one difference was that with the rat studies, they were using a huge amount of aflatoxin. Like they were just exposing the rats to almost impossible amounts that would never happen in real life. But, oopsie. But there's one study that was done on monkeys that instead of feeding this huge dose of aflatoxin, or exposing them to a huge dose of aflatoxin, they're exposing them to daily smaller doses of aflatoxin, which is what would happen if you were living in an area that had aflatoxin-contaminated food and you're eating a little bit with each meal. So this actually resembles something that could happen in real life. So as with Campbell's rats, one group of monkeys got 5% of their diet as casein, and the other got 20%. Can you guess what happened in this case? The low-protein monkeys died. What happened to the high-protein monkeys eating all that animal protein? They were fine. They were fine. So these results are almost completely opposite of what Campbell found using his less realistic animal experiments. And what it shows is that it's actually the level of aflatoxin that kind of influences what happens once you're feeding different diets or different levels of casein. And the real quick version of what's going on is that when you're eating a protein-deficient diet, your liver, enzyme activity in your liver decreases, and basically you can't detoxify the things you're eating. So if you're exposed to aflatoxin and you're eating a protein-deficient diet, instead of your body detoxifying the aflatoxin and turning it into carcinogenic metabolites, what happens is it just stays in your body as a toxic thing, and it creates liver damage. And so in some cases, like with these poor guys, they were having such severe liver damage from their low-protein diet that they just died. They died before they could get cancer, whereas these guys were still healthy enough to live and actually not even get cancer. So Campbell's research and this idea that animal protein itself is some kind of switch for turning on and off cancer growth, it's a complete misrepresentation of what the actual research is. And unfortunately, this one part of the book really has scared a lot of people away from eating animal products because it seems so convincing on the surface. So that's quite unfortunate. So bottom line, in Campbell's rat studies, the rats were exposed to massive levels of aflatoxin, which is the equivalent of eating at least 80,000 jars of aflatoxin-contaminated peanut butter in one sitting. I mean, peanut butter tastes great, but how many people could actually eat that much? I mean, it's okay, you can raise your hand, I won't judge. Thank you for your honesty back there, I appreciate it. And thank you actually to Chris Masterjohn for this statistic too, because he wrote some great papers on this. And the monkey study, on the other hand, was using lower aflatoxin dose that mimicked what would happen in real life. So you can kind of see that if we're going to look at any of these experiments and say, well, does this have any relevance to real life? It would be the monkey experiment where the low-protein monkeys were the ones dying. So there we go. The more realistic study actually showed the benefits of animal protein. Go figure. So I think this is just really important to remember. If anyone out there ever gets slammed over the head with a China study book and by a vegan who's trying to convince you that animal protein is causing cancer, just remember this research and remember that Campbell's research was not something that can really have a direct application to real life, because it just can't. Sorry, but I was... So here's just a summary of everything we've talked about so far. China study data. Animal foods were not directly associated with most diseases in the raw data. That just bottom line, that it just wasn't there. And even so, I think in the China study book there was a problem of mistaking correlation with causation. Just because there's an association in observational data, it doesn't mean that one thing is causing another. We can never tell that unless we actually take an experiment into a controlled setting and manipulate variables and and manipulate variables and see what exactly is causing what, how it's all linked together. And the peer-reviewed research does not support the claims in the China study book. Even if you don't want to listen to me because I'm an English major and I spelled right W-R-I-T-E when I meant R-I-G-H-T, I know that just totally ruined my credibility. I'm so sorry. You don't have to listen to me. You can actually look up the original papers that were based on the China study data, and it says the same thing. Campbell was not correctly, I guess, expressing the research of the China study. And same goes for his rat research. It was a distortion of reality in many ways. And lastly, the extrapolation of the effects of casein to all animal protein. I didn't mention this too much, but we have examples of, say, whey protein. How many people have heard about the anti-cancer properties of whey protein? It's in just a huge number of studies have shown that whey protein actually has great immunological properties, and it really is health boosting, and there's absolutely no evidence that that kind of protein contributes to cancer. So why are we assuming that casein is a good representation of every single kind of animal protein in existence? That just doesn't make sense. So I do want to say just a couple nice things about the China study, because I don't like this to be all mean, because I'm kind of a nice person sometimes. So, so the good is that the China study argues that most modern diseases are influenced by diet. And I think that this is something that probably most people in here can agree with, because I'm sure many of you have started out with some kind of chronic condition that you've seen improve with diet. And for people to kind of make the connection that what you eat really, really does influence your life. It influences how well you can live it. It influences how well you just feel every day. I think that a lot of people don't realize how strong that connection is. And so just the fact that this book kind of gets that idea out there, maybe that's a good thing, even if the rest of it's not so good. And it promotes a whole foods diet free from refined sugar, refined grains, and industrial oils, which I think probably most people in this audience avoid most of those things anyway. So that's actually one commonality that Campbell has with low-carb diets and paleo diets, is the elimination of a lot of these refined carbohydrates. So my hypothesis is that that probably has something to do with the benefits that a lot of people see when they first switch to plant-based whole foods diets. Is that it's not because they're ditching the meat, it's because they're ditching all these other foods. And it also highlights the role of food industries and big pharma in dictating our health and guidelines, which is of special interest to me because I'm actually writing a book right now called Death by Food Pyramid, and it's going over... Thank you. I'm excited about it. There's some cool stuff that I'm going to put in it. And I think it's something that not everyone realizes when you look at the ADA or the American, even the American Heart Association. So much of what they write and what they publish is actually sponsored by food industries, and it's disgusting. You'll read a handout sheet about the benefit or the pros and cons of soda, and it'll be sponsored by Pepsi. And most people don't even realize this, and they don't realize that what we conceive of as conventional wisdom is based so much on profit. It's based on keeping our economy afloat by promoting these really unhealthy but highly profitable foods. And I just think it's nice that this book at least addresses that and kind of brings it to the surface, the fact that so much of what we think we know about health is actually funded by something. So even if there's nothing else too fantastic in the book, maybe we can just agree on these points. So, and that's it. And I wanted to leave a few minutes if anyone has any questions, because I thought maybe a couple of people might. I already saw some hands up. So thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something from this. Do I have to leave? Do I have to leave, or do we have time for questions? Yeah, okay, anyone have any questions? 3 minutes. Okay, 3 minutes for questions. Anybody have a question? Oh, yeah.
Denise, somewhere when you said online that when you changed your diet, the color of your eyes changed?
Yeah, actually.
Can you repeat the question for him?
Oh yeah, she asked, when I made a dietary change, I saw the color of my eyes change. And yes, this actually happened when I became a raw foodist. And I think it has something to do with glutathione because it has something to do with, I forget the exact way this works, but if you have a very high glutathione level or something, it interferes with melanin production, I think. Does anyone know anything about this actually? Because it's not something I've researched too much because I haven't actually been that interested in the explanation. But when I did switch to a raw food diet, my eyes went from kind of a darker brown to greenish hazel. And it's actually something that a lot of raw foodists report. And I'm not sure that anyone really understands why that happens, but it is kind of interesting. So I don't know if that answers your question at all. Sorry. Yeah.
What would you say to vegetarians who say that their diet is more sustainable for the planet rather than pasturing cows?
I would say, actually, I would point them to a book called Meat, A Benign Extravagance by Simon Fairley. And I recommend this book to everyone because it is so well researched. And it blows that idea apart. It shows that most of the data that those kinds of arguments come from, it's really warped or it's miscalculated. And if you actually look at the reality of our food systems, probably the most sustainable one is decentralized agriculture, where we do have animals, eating on land that's unsuitable for planting crops and such forth. So again, it's the book called Meat, A Benign Extravagance by Simon Fairley. And I would just say, read that book, and then you don't have to argue with them anymore. Okay, yeah?
Yeah, wasn't Campbell using oxidized casing, burnt?
I'm not sure what kind of casing he was using, but it was highly refined, and there is some evidence that isolated casing itself may be more problematic, again, just in the isolated sense, than other forms of protein. So that's another problem with extrapolating it to all forms of animal protein. But it's one of those things where when it's working in synergy with the actual whole food component in milk, the effects are completely different. So you really can't say anything based on these refined studies, the refined diets. So, yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
2 years ago, I released this book, The Mouthtrap, The Butt Stops Here. And since then, I've been a year on a low-carb diet, and I've changed the book. I have a new edition. I don't have to tell you there's a problem with what we've been eating. It's everywhere. You can see the obesity. You hear all the time of people being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, chronic this and chronic that. And I've done a lot of research, I've attended lectures, for a year I've just been studying this. The first book told you how to mind whatever diet you chose, and this book tells you how to mind a low-carb diet, and it helps you go through a whole year of changing your life. It'll help you mind the lifestyle. There's more and more evidence that carbohydrates are the culprit here, and mostly it's about sugar. We don't want to give up sugar, but I can make it so easy for you. And The Mouthtrap, The Butt Stops Here, the low-carb version, is going to help you do that. I hope my book can help a younger generation, because you don't need to wait till you're my age to change your life. And I feel cheated that I didn't know the truth, and now I know the truth, and it's in my book. When you read the book, you'll find out that I should weigh 288 pounds right now, but I've been on a low-carb diet for a year and 2 months, and I weigh 135. But if I followed calories in, calories out, I would weigh 288. One of the most exciting things for me is this book is available as a book. So you can get it as an e-book, an audio book, or a real book.